Hi there and welcome to Chassidic Gems, where we take a look at a Chassidic explanation on a particular verse or concept in our Torah portion. This week's Torah portion is the double Torah portion of Nitzavim-Vayeilech, and so we will choose a verse in Vayeilech to look at the very, very end of the Parsha. In Vayeilech, Moses commands the Levites with these words: "Take this book of the law," meaning a Torah scroll, "and put it by the side of the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God." The Talmud records two conflicting interpretations of the phrase "by the side of the Ark." One maintains that the Sefer Torah, the Torah scroll, was placed inside of the Ark, together with the tablets on which the Ten Commandments were engraved. This entire discussion is in the tractate Bava Basra. This happens to be the opinion of Rebbe Meir. The other holds that that it was placed outside on a ledge which projected from the side of the ark. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rashi actually brings this interpretation and this disagreement or discussion in his commentary on the Torah, which means that it is necessary for the simple and basic meaning of the verse. In essence, it's necessary to add this component of how the Torah scroll related to the ark, and by extension, as we'll read in a second, to the Holy of Holies where the ark was positioned, in order to really understand the purpose of a Torah scroll. Both agree, however, that it was within the area of the Holy of Holies. Very simply, the Holy of Holies was the chamber for the ark. The Torah scroll was either within the ark on a shelf or outside of the ark on a shelf. Obviously, the whole thing puts all three elements together: the Holy of Holies, where the ark was, and where the Torah scroll was. Thus, the Holy of Holies contained both the written Sefer Torah and the engraved tablets. We can see that the tablets were appropriate to the Holy of Holies because both were miraculously in space and at the same time beyond it. That is to say, the ark that contained the tablets and the tablets were miraculous in nature. The Holy of Holies being the holiest place in the world, transcending this concept of time and space within time and space, makes a perfect match. The Ark of the Covenant, had physical dimensions. It was 2.5 cubits in length and 1.5 cubits in height and breadth. That's the definition given to us in the book of Exodus. That is the way that it was designed by Bezalel. And yet it occupied no space. For it is recorded that the Holy of Holies was 20 cubits wide, and yet that the ark had a free space of 10 cubits on either side. So 20 cubits in total wide, 10 cubits on one side free, and 10 cubits on another side free. That's 20 already. What about the ark itself? So from the verse in Exodus and from the verse in Kings, which tells us respectively the dimensions of the ark and then the free space of the Holy of Holies, we see that there's basically no way that the whole thing works. The Talmud resolves the contradiction by saying, we have it as a tradition that the place of the ark is not within measured space. That is to say that even though there is a measure, there are dimensions for the ark, and there are dimensions for the Holy of Holies, nevertheless, at the same time, it is without or outside of time and space. Similarly, the letters of the tablets that were in that ark, although they were letters that could be read and measured, they had no substance apart from the stone. In particular, the final mem and samach, which are basically a square and a circle, were preserved by a miracle. The way that the tablets were engraved is not like what we would imagine engraving stone is nowadays. You go to a cemetery, for example, and you see gravestones engraved. They are, let's say, 1 inch thick, and they're engraved 1/4 of an inch in, whatever the numbers are. But certainly they're not engraved through and through. That was not the case with the tablets. The tablets were engraved through and through. Furthermore, the tablets were engraved side to side so that there was no margin at all, not as far as width and not as far as depth. So when we would consider, for example, a piece of paper, you have margin. Even if, let's say, a gravestone, you have margin. When it comes to the tablets, there was no margin, so how exactly did the whole stone not fall apart? Furthermore, again, the mem and the samech are a square and a circle, and since they're engraved all the way through, how is it that the middle part, whether a square or a circle, doesn't fall out? It was a miracle. They are closed letters, so the stone which they surrounded was joined to nothing, but was kept in place by God. The letters, in other words, were in space, but not of it. Again, on the one hand, measurable, tangible, but on the other hand, transcendent of physical tangibility. But what was the relation to the Torah scroll, to the Holy of Holies? In other words, the Holy of Holies is beyond space, beyond measure. The Ark and the tablets within, same thing. The Torah scroll, which was on the side of the Ark, seems to be out of place. Its letters were written. They were ink on parchment. We'll note that God was the one that engraved the stone tablets. Even the second tablet that Moses hewed or carved out of stone, God still engraved them. And for sure the first ones, where both the hewing and the engraving was done by God. When it comes to the Torah scroll, Moses writes the first Torah scroll, he writes it. God isn't involved. God, of course, dictates what he should write, but Moses puts the whole thing together by himself. All the subsequent Torah scrolls ever in the history of the world, written by people, not by God. So there was nothing miraculous about them. Why should the Torah scroll, nothing miraculous, be in the setting, be among these miraculous entities? The Holy of Holies contained in space and time what was above space and time. There are some who want to say that because this whole measure thing doesn't work, that the Holy of Holies was not a physical location, or the ark was not a physical vessel. That's not true at all. There is a clear commandment to make an ark, and that's what was done. The verse tells us the command, and the verse tells us that they made one. So on the one hand, they were physical in nature, measurable, tangible. On the other hand, they were above measure. That was the miracle. But its ultimate purpose was that this miracle should spread its light outward to the priest's court, to the court of the Israelites, the women's court, the Temple Mount, and beyond, to all the nations of the world, to make them all aware that the infinite may be found in the finite, that God dwells within the world. Again, the ultimate expression of God's infinity is not in the spiritual realm, because that's in essence relegating God to the spiritual. The ultimate expression of God's infinity is when that spirituality is revealed or expressed in a physical context. The ultimate union between the two, between the spiritual and the physical, though they are opposites. So even though it starts with the tablets, and it starts with the Ark, and it starts with the Holy of Holies, all of which existed before Moses wrote the Torah scrolls that he wrote, nevertheless, that's not where it ends. Therefore, the Torah scroll was housed in the Holy of Holies as an intermediary between this inner sanctum and the world. For the Ark and the tablets represented complete effacement in the presence of God, hence they were so nullified that they weren't within the parameters of time and space. They occupied no space. They were something become nothing. But the letters of the Torah were tangible, written in ink on parchment. Thus the Torah is the medium through which the light of God reaches the world which lives in time and space. In fact, the Aramaic word for Torah, Eiraisa, is an amalgam of three Aramaic words: Oir, light; Yud, which is a shorthand way of writing God's name; and the word Sa, which means come. The light of God comes. Not through the tablets, not through the Ark or through the Holy of Holies, but specifically through the Torah, in this case specifically the Torah scroll. In Chassidic thought, Rosh Hashanah has a particular spiritual characteristic. Now, we're not necessarily learning about Rosh Hashanah in this parsha, but Vayeilech, where our verse comes from that we've been explaining, is in essence inherently connected with another parsha, the parsha right before it, Nitzavim. So much so that whereas there are several pairings of parshas. Some parshas are usually read together. Behar b'chukaisai is a very common combination. Chukas Balak is a very common combination. And when they're read together, they are to be considered as one unit. But the reality is, all of those other Torah portions, when paired with their common partner, are still considered individual Torah portions that sometimes, or even the majority of times, are read together. And when read together, they should be considered as one unit. But reality is that they are two separate portions fundamentally. Nitzavim-Vayeilech is looked at exactly in the opposite fashion. Unlike every other pairing of other Torah portions, where if needed they are paired, Nitzavim and Vayeilech, it's if needed they are separated. So fundamentally, Nitzavim and Vayeilech should be seen as one Torah portion that sometimes needs to be separated. So this verse that we've been discussing as far as placing the Torah scroll on the side of the ark is in Vayeilech, but because Vayeilech is basically the second half of Nitzavim, Nitzavim plays into this discussion. And Nitzavim, and usually Nitzavim-Vayeilech, is required reading in preparation for Rosh Hashanah. Across the board, whether it's a regular year or a leap year, regardless of anything, Nitzavim and usually Nitzavim-Vayeilech are read before Rosh Hashanah. In Chassidic thought, Rosh Hashanah has a particular spiritual characteristic. Every single holiday, in fact, has a particular characteristic based on what it celebrates or commemorates, and the precepts, the commandments that are done in furtherance of that commemoration. Throughout the rest of the year, we serve God mainly within the limits of our reason, and even the self-sacrifices we make relate to our understanding of the needs of the hour. But on Rosh Hashanah, we reach a state of self-effacement, which is totally beyond reason. The verse in the prophet says, "Search for Hashem where he is found." Hashem is everywhere. Hashem is everything. So what do you mean where he is found? The sages tell us these are the 10 days of awe. Of course, Hashem is available always. If you turn to him, pray to him, return to him, fine. But there are these 10 days, Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, the 10 days of awe, which are especially filled, as it were, with Hashem's full revelation. Being that we have that full revelation, it nullifies us, putting us in a state of self-effacement before God. We are not pursuing a rational objective. We are responding to a revelation from a source beyond our understanding. That's why on these days, we can return and be effective in our tshuva, in our return, more than the rest of the days. Because the confinement or hindrance of logic and ordered progression is gone during these 10 days. We can jump ahead in an unordered, illogical, supra-rational way and connect to God in a way that otherwise we wouldn't necessarily be able to. That's why one of the reasons that's given for the blowing of the shofar is like a cry of a child to his parents. Not the speech of a child to his parents. We'll note that the notes, as it were, the blowings of the shofar, are not like a musical instrument that we can play a song, but rather they're these groans or moans or whatever you want to call them, cries, like a child, like a baby, who can't formulate his ideas into words, but that's the whole point. They're so essential, they're so heartfelt, that they automatically pierce and transcend any kind of logical consideration on the part of the father or the parent, that immediately there's a connection. This state, though it belongs to Rosh Hashanah, must not be confined to it. That's how we extrapolate that sensibility from Rosh Hashanah and those 10 days of awe and apply them to the rest of the year, which is really the function of all of the holidays. We have, for example, Shavuos, Zman Matan Tereseinu, the festival of the giving of our Torah. But that's not relegated to just those 2 days in the diaspora or 1 day in Israel of Shavuos. It's for the whole of the year. Our connection to the Torah comes from Shavuos. So for the whole of the year, our ability to have this supra-rational connection to God comes from Rosh Hashanah. Throughout the rest of the year, while we live and behave within our rational framework, we must carry with us that inspiration of something higher than that which reason can grasp. It is like the Holy of Holies in the letters of the tablets. Though they had their location in space, they gave light to the whole world. And though the Shoshana has its location in time, it illuminates the whole year. But for this to happen, there must be a preparation. And the clue lies in the opening sentence of the Parsha, of the Sedra, we always read before the Shoshana. Nitzavim. Remember, Nitzavim-Vayeilech are basically two halves of the same unit. You are standing this day, all of you, before the Lord your God, your heads, your tribes, your elders, and your officers, from the hewer of your wood to the drawer of your water. Now, once it says all of you, why do we need to go into particular groups? You are standing this day, all of you, before the Lord your God. That obviously includes everybody. Why do we then have to go, your heads, your tribes, etc.? Every Jew must attach himself to the community, not by losing his individual identity. If the verse had just said all of you, we may erroneously understand that to mean I have to lose my individual identity in favor of the community, in favor of the group. The verse therefore continues and negates that erroneous conclusion. No, you are to keep your individual identity. You as an individual bring something unique to the group. So we have to find a way to keep our individual identity, to bring that positivity of who we are, and at the same time benefit the group while doing so on an individual basis. Every Jew must attach himself to the community. Even the heads of your tribes must not stand aloof from the drawer of your waters, meaning the higher to the lower. Jewish unity demands no less than all of you. The Jew who breaks through social distinctions to become one with the whole community breaks through the distinctions of time as well. He brings the spirit of Rosh Hashanah into the rest of the calendar and spreads its blessings throughout the year.